HPSP would have paid for my entire medical school tuition. It would have given me a monthly stipend while I was in school, provided military experience, and potentially allowed me to graduate without hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. And after researching it for months, speaking with people in the program, and getting extremely close to accepting it, I ultimately decided not to take it. And not because HPSP is a bad program, because I honestly think it can be one of the best opportunities available to a lot of medical students out there. But I realized a scholarship was not entirely free, or not really free medical school. The real price was committing years of my future before I knew exactly what I wanted that future to look like. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Mohammed Ashmeri. I'm a medical student, and on this channel I share what I'm learning about in medical school, health, finances, and the decisions that come with becoming a physician. Today I want to talk to you about the Health Professions Scholarship Program, or better known as HPSP. More specifically, I want to explain what attracted me to it, what made me hesitate, and why I ultimately chose student loans instead. This is not a video telling you that HPSP is good or bad, and it is also not financial or military career advice. This is simply the thought process I used when I had to make a very personal decision that could affect me in the next 8 to 12 years of my life. Towards the end, I will give you the one question that helped me make this final decision. Long before starting medical school, I knew that becoming a physician was going to be expensive, but there's a big difference between hearing that medical school is expensive and when you're actually sitting down to calculate the numbers. When I looked at tuition, fees, housing, and all the other extra stuff like interest, I realized I could be potentially leaving medical school with around $500K in student loans or $500,000, especially since the balance can continue to grow while you're in school or during residency because of interest. That number was very difficult for me to process. $500K is a lot of money, and it can affect what jobs you consider, how quickly you feel comfortable with buying a home, how you can invest, how much financial pressure you carry into residency and afterwards. So very early on, I started looking into alternatives. How can I reduce the cost? What other forgiveness programs are out there? And are there any other scholarships? Was there another path that can allow me to become a physician without this financial burden? And that's when I discovered HPSP. After taking the MCAT, I started getting a couple of emails from the military about HPSP, but I mostly ignored them. I just assumed it was a small scholarship with a long list of conditions. Then I actually started researching what it actually offered. And when I tell you, it felt like I had discovered a gold mine. The first major benefit of HPSP was tuition coverage. And this was not just a scholarship offering a few $1,000s. Scholarship can cover all of your medical school tuition. Whether someone attended a school charging around $60K a year, or one charging $120K, Uncle Sam takes the bill. And then there was the monthly stipend, where instead of borrowing additional money for all the living expenses, I could just receive money while attending medical school. It's a good amount, around 2.7K to 3K. It's on par with inflation. So you are already doing something you plan to do, like being a physician, but instead of watching that debt grow every semester and carrying that financial burden, you're getting paid to go to school. This completely changed the whole emotional experience of going to medical school. The second thing that attracted me was the military experience. I liked the idea of becoming a physician while also still developing leadership skills, learning within a completely different healthcare system, and serving the country that gave me and my family the opportunity to build a new life. I also loved the possibility of traveling, experiencing different locations, meeting people from different backgrounds, and growing in ways that I probably would not experience through a traditional civilian pathway. At that point, the program seemed to give me everything: a path to becoming a physician without a mountain of student debt, and on paper, it was extremely difficult to reject. But the more attractive a contract looks, the more carefully you need to study what you're actually agreeing on. The simplest way to understand HPSP is that it's not just a scholarship, it is a military service contract. In general, you receive qualifying educational benefits during medical school, and in exchange, you incur an active duty service obligation. The common way people describe it is a year-for-year service, so every year they sponsor you, you owe an active duty year. Although there's some extra obligations depending on the scholarship or military branch. For example, with a 4-year scholarship, someone may owe 4 years of active duty service as a military physician after completing their residency. Military residency usually does not simply erase or pay back your service obligation. Residency is your medical training, and your obligation is to pay back 4 years after you're trained. Extra fellowship pathways can also create additional service obligations, depending on the situation, although the average is a year and a half service for every year of fellowship. These are the guidelines as the recording of this video. And that is why you should never calculate your commitment based on your recruiter saying it is 4 years of school or 4 years of service. You need to understand the entire possible timeline: medical school, residency, any possible fellowship opportunities or training, and any additional commitment you voluntarily accept later. When I consider the complete timeline, I realized I was not making a 4-year decision. I could potentially be making a decision that influenced the next 10 to 12 years of my life. And that really changed the way I view the scholarship. There were four major things I kept returning to: residency and specialty flexibility, location, deployment and family life, and control over my future. One of my biggest concerns was residency. When you join HPSP, you're not simply a civilian medical student whose tuition happens to be paid by the military. You're entering the military medical training system. Your residency path can depend on military needs, available training positions, and the options available during the year you apply. Majority are military residencies, and in some cases, there may be a civilian-sponsored or civilian-deferred pathways. A civilian-sponsored would mean that it would be a civilian residency where you get paid by the military, which would cause you to owe an additional 4 years compared to your original contract, owing 8 years in total. And civilian deferred means you're just going to be doing your residency as a civilian, getting paid by the actual hospital. And after training, you just do the service obligation, but the availability is low compared to military residencies. Special interests can also change dramatically during medical school. Someone may begin medical school convinced that they want emergency medicine or surgery, and discover a completely different field during clinical rotations. So I asked myself three questions, the big what if questions. What if my interests change during medical school? And what if the specialty I want has very few military positions that year? And what if I decide to pursue fellowship training? That uncertainty did not mean that the military would prevent me from becoming a good physician. There are excellent military residency programs and outstanding military physicians. The issue was that I could not guarantee how much control I would retain over the process. The next concern was location. Military service means the needs of the military matter first. You can communicate your preferences, but preference is not the same thing as complete control. There was a possibility that I could be stationed somewhere I would not have personally selected. When I was only thinking about myself, that seemed very manageable. I thought traveling sounded exciting, and I thought living somewhere new could help me grow. But once I thought about having my wife, building our family, and somewhat stability, control of location became much more important. Moving can be constant in the military, especially with the military residencies and service obligations, so I acknowledged this reality. Deployment was another concern. From the military physicians and participants I spoke with, I understand that deployment experiences vary by specialty branch and military needs. Some physicians may deploy, others may complete their obligation without that type of deployment, so I do not want to exaggerate this and act like every HPSP physician is constantly being deployed. But the possibility still existed, and I had to ask myself whether I was genuinely willing to accept that possibility, not whether I thought it was likely, but whether I could accept it if it had happened. As I thought more seriously about building a family, I realized how deeply I valued being present. I did not want to sign a contract while privately hoping that one of its major responsibilities would never apply to me. If I joined, I wanted to be fully prepared to serve wherever I was needed. I was not confident that I could honestly say that. Another thing is, all of these concerns came back to one central issue: control. The scholarship solved a major financial problem, but it introduced a different type of obligation. With student loans, I would owe money. With HPSP, I would owe time and service. Money can create pressure, there's no question about that, but a contract can also restrict your choices and freedoms. I had to decide which obligation I was more comfortable carrying. And personally, I realized I was more comfortable owing money than promising years of my future before I fully understood what I wanted those years to look like. There's no universal calculation showing that HPSP and loans always come out equal. For some students, HPSP may be financially superior by a massive margin. I would say anyone coming out of school with 400K or more, as well as the interest of the specialty. Choosing ortho or anesthesiology can have you losing money if you take a military path, since the civilian path is very lucrative. Now, money isn't everything, of course, but it is an important factor to consider when making these decisions. And for some people, military service is valuable, independent of money. That is why the answer could not come entirely from a spreadsheet. The question that finally clarified the decision for me was, if the military removed the scholarship and the tuition benefit, would I still want to serve as a military physician? Not necessarily under the exact same contract, but was the desire to serve genuinely strong enough that I would still want the military lifestyle without being pulled toward it primarily by the money? For me, the honest answer was not a strong enough yes. I respected the opportunity, I loved many parts of it, and I could imagine myself enjoying the leadership, the structure, the people, and the mission. But this decision shouldn't include just me, but also my family. And I also knew that the financial benefit was doing a lot of the work in convincing me. And I do not think you should make a military commitment primarily because you're afraid of student loans. Fear can make any escape route look perfect, but once you sign that contract, you are not only accepting the benefits, you are also accepting the responsibilities, the uncertainty, the potential moves, and the lack of control in the next decade of your life. You have to be able to accept the whole package. Primarily, I chose student loans because freedom and flexibility mattered more to me than eliminating that debt immediately. This does not mean student loans are harmless. 500K is an enormous amount of money, and it will require a serious repayment strategy. It's going to influence where I work, how I spend my money, how much I invest, and how I approach my finances after residency. I'm not pretending that choosing loans means choosing total freedom. That can limit you in a lot of ways. But the difference for me was that I retained more control over my residency applications, specialty decisions, location, and how I structured my life after training. There was financial risk, but there was also flexibility. And when I imagined where I wanted to be in 10 or 12 years, with my family, career, and long-term goals, I felt more comfortable carrying the financial obligation than the military one. That was my decision. It may not be the correct decision for someone else. And I want to be very clear, I am not against HPSP, and honestly think a large part of me still supports it because the benefits are difficult to ignore, especially with the amount of medical school debt reaching a new ceiling every year, and with the new Trump administration capping federal loans at $200K. HPSP may be an incredible decision for many people, but not a financial one, a personal one. Someone who already feels a calling to military service, values military leadership and structure, and would still want this path even without calculating every decision around the scholarship money. For that person, HPSP can bring about a meaningful career and life experience that also happens to provide an enormous financial benefit. But if the only thing that attracts you is free tuition, I would slow down, and it should not make the final decision for you. I hope this helps some people understand the scholarship opportunity better. Let me know in the comments which option you are considering if you're faced with this opportunity, and what part of that decision has been the hardest for you. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good day.